Well, the US and China have agreed to reduce tariffs on each other's imports for 90 days. After Swiss trade talks, the US says it will drop its tariffs on Chinese imports from 145% to 30%, while China's tariffs will fall from 125% to 10%. That agreement and a commitment to future talks comes as China's economy recorded a third straight month of deflation. Well, Jason Douglas is the Wall Street Journal's Asia economy reporter, and he joins me now from Singapore. Douglas, Jason, good to have you with us. Now, many analysts were somewhat surprised by the scale of these tariff reductions from Washington and Beijing. How do you see it?
I think that's fair. Certainly, the scale of the reduction was much larger than anyone was anticipating. I think one analyst referred to it as a dream scenario that the tariffs came down quite so much and that the two sides have agreed to keep talking. Certainly, stock markets have reacted positively to the news and the dollar. So it does seem like a much bigger deal than people were anticipating before the talk.
Yeah, and for quite some time now, I've been speaking to analysts in this war of words that's been happening for weeks and then months. And the question I've always had was who would blink first on this trade war, who would de-escalate the situation between China and the US. So does today's announcement give an indication of who needed this more than the other?
That's a good question. I mean, I think both sides really needed this, despite all the war of words as you described it. The United States economy looked like it was heading for another bout of inflation. It looked like growth was slowing. China was in much the same boat. Exports to the US were sinking, although they were holding up okay to other countries. But there are lots of jobs at Chinese factories that are dependent on, sales to the US. So really, both sides needed it. I think in terms of who blinked first, it's probably fair to say that it was the United States, because they did open the possibility of lowering tariffs on China a couple of weeks ago. But really, both sides certainly needed to de-escalate.
And do you see China taking, that moral high ground first? Because the foreign ministry spokesman today said that, quote, we hope that the U.S. side will continue to work with China to thoroughly correct the practice of unilateral increases. And this is all said as, it was very, very in the early hours of the U.S. So has time, gone to their favor?
Well, one thing that did come out of the trade talks and the press conference with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent this morning, was that the U.S. side felt that the escalation wouldn't really have happened had these guardrails been in place that they used to have. What they mean is they used to have regular talks, like U.S. and Chinese officials would talk regularly on issues of trade and economic security and so on. But these sort of channels had broken down. And so that was one of the reasons that they gave why the escalation kind of got out of control. So they've tried to put these back in, and the message from the US side, at least today, was that this escalation shouldn't really happen again because they now have much better and much more open channels of communication.
So we've got this 90-day pause at the moment, a big drop in tariffs. What are the main industries that are, breathing the biggest sighs of relief from both countries?
So I think it will be pretty much across the board. I mean, the tariffs covered every single good that you could import from China. There were a few exceptions and things like electronics and so on. So I think furniture retailers, clothing, everyone will be pretty pleased with this. I think there are a couple of industries that might still be a little bit anxious because the announcement today did not cover the US tariffs on things like automobiles, for instance, and steel and aluminium. China doesn't sell a lot of cars directly to the US, but it does have lots of businesses involved in auto supply chains, and of course steel and aluminium are still a big thing, and we still have further tariffs to come on things like semiconductors. So while lots of trade has been covered by this, there are still a few more sensitive areas where tariffs are still going to be higher.
Yes, in any case, do you think this at all is a signal by the Trump administration towards countries like Canada and Mexico, the other two countries that have been subject to major American tariffs?
Well, if you were in Canada or Mexico, you would hopefully the hopeful message you would take away would be that if you could reach some kind of deal with China, which is your, most avowed enemy in trade and a geopolitical adversary, then it shouldn't be too much trouble to reach some sort of agreement with Canada and Mexico. Certainly, what it does show is the US is in the mood for talking, that negotiations are happening, even with like I said, a big rival. So it should be possible, you would hope, that Canada and Mexico can hopefully find a way forward too.
And with today's announcement, we saw Chinese stock markets rally, the yuan strengthening. Are we expecting the same when Wall Street opens up tomorrow?
We certainly are. I think US stock futures are up quite a bit. The Nasdaq, I think I saw, was up maybe 3%. Stocks in Europe are up as well. So certainly investors are are pretty delighted by this and feel that it really is, perhaps the beginning of the end, at least of the worst phase of the trade war.
And all this is happening as well as Beijing announced, a third straight month of deflation. Do you see things changing with now this, the pause of these tariffs?
As regards China's economy, I think a lot of the problems there are still present, and they would be even without the trade war. China at the minute, the reason you have deflation is China's producing too much and consuming too little, and exporting an awful lot of stuff, which is causing trade tensions around the world, not just with the US. So while the tariffs, the reduction in tariffs will bring, some relief to exporters in China, particularly those that are focused on the US, I think without some, serious economic reforms, these kind of pressures that are causing the deflation that we're seeing in China are just going to persist. China really needs to reorient its economy away from industrial production and exports and much more towards consumption. It needs to get people to spend more and save less. But that's been something they've been talking about for years, and progress on it has been slow.
Yep. Okay, Jason Douglas, we'll leave it there, but thank you very much for explaining it all for us.
My pleasure. Thank you.